In September 2019, in a lecture hall at Cambridge University, a professor said something that would change everything. Not because it was true, but because it was so obviously, arrogantly, provably wrong. And one woman, with nothing but her grandmother's cloth and 4 years of research, was able to prove it. Welcome to the Afro Tales with Kemi, where African stories are told slowly, honestly, and with meaning. So sit back, open your heart, and walk with me through today's tale, told as always, the African way. I am Kemi Iwalesi. Professor Richard Harrington stood at the front of the seminar room, his voice dripping with condescension. Dr. Asante, while I appreciate your enthusiasm for celebrating your cultural heritage, this thesis committee expects rigorous mathematical analysis, not folk art. He gestured dismissively at the projection on the screen. A photograph of Kente cloth, geometric, intricate, beautiful. These patterns, he continued, are aesthetically pleasing, certainly. But to suggest they contain mathematical proofs that weavers in pre-colonial Ghana were conducting algorithmic computations, he paused, smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. That's not mathematics, Dr. Asante. That's romanticization. The room was silent. 23 professors, doctoral candidates, research fellows, all watching, waiting to see if Dr. Asante, the only black woman in Cambridge's mathematics PhD program, would defend her work or fold. Amma stood, slowly. Her hands weren't shaking, not anymore. She has spent 4 years preparing for this exact moment. 4 years of being told, subtly and not so subtly, that African contributions to mathematics were limited to basic counting systems. 4 years of having her research questioned, minimized, dismissed. But she had something Professor Harrington didn't have. Proof. Professor Harrington, Amma said, her voice calm, clear, unwavering. What if I told you that the Adwenisa pattern, woven by my grandmother and her mother before her, contains a complete proof of fractal self-similarity that European mathematicians didn't formalize until 1975? Silence. What if I told you that the weaving sequence encodes binary logic, the same logic your computer uses, developed centuries before Leibniz invented it in 1679? Professor Harrington's smile faltered. What if I told you, Amma continued, stepping toward the screen, that what you call folk art is actually one of the most sophisticated systems of geometric computations ever developed? And that my grandmother, who never attended university, who learned to weave at age 7, can execute algorithms in her mind that will take your computer 12 steps to process? She clicked to the next slide. On the left, her grandmother's hands weaving, the shuttle moving in precise patterns, thread crossing thread in rhythmic sequences. On the right, lines of code, mathematical proofs, fractal diagrams, binary sequences. They were identical. So, Professor Harrington, Amma said quietly, the question isn't whether this is mathematics. The question is, why did it take Cambridge 400 years to recognize what Ghanaian weavers have known for 1,000? This is the story of how a grandmother's cloth became a mathematical revolution. How threads and shuttles held secrets that silicon and circuits only recently discovered. How one woman proved what should never have needed proving. That genius doesn't require a university. That mathematics doesn't belong to Europe. That African intellectual sovereignty isn't a claim. It's a fact, woven into every thread. 4 years earlier, Asante sat in her childhood bedroom in Kumasi, Ghana. She was 24, fresh from completing a master's degree in mathematics at the University of Ghana. And she'd just been accepted to Cambridge. Full scholarship, PhD program, computational mathematics. Her parents were proud. Her professors were thrilled. But her grandmother, Nana Afua, was quiet. "You are going very far away," Nana Afua said, "to study numbers, to learn from people who think they invented counting." Amma smiled. "Nana, it's Cambridge, one of the best mathematics programs in the world." Nana Afua made a sound. Not quite agreement, not quite dismissal. She stood slowly, her joints creaking with age, and walked to a wooden chest in the corner of the room. From it, she pulled a cloth. Kente. Not the tourist kind. Not the mass-produced fabric sold in markets. This was old, traditional, woven on a narrow loom. The pattern was called Adwenisa, seal of knowledge in Akan. "Take this with you," Nana Afua said. Amma touched the cloth gently. The geometric patterns were mesmerizing. Repeating diamonds, interlocking triangles, lines that seemed to mirror themselves at different scales. "It's beautiful, Nana. But why?" "So you remember." "Remember what?" Nana Afua's eyes held hers. "That we were doing mathematics long before anyone gave it that name." Amma folded the cloth carefully and packed it in her suitcase. She didn't understand what her grandmother meant. Not yet. But she would. Cambridge was everything and nothing like Amma expected. The libraries were magnificent. The lectures were rigorous. The research facilities were world-class. But the assumptions, the casual dismissals, actually corrections, they wore on her. In her first semester on algorithmic theory, a classmate said, "Of course, algorithmic thinking originated with Arab mathematicians in the 9th century, then developed further in Europe during the Renaissance." Anna raised her hand. "What about African contributions? Ishango bone, the Lebombo bone, mathematical thinking that predates written history?" The professor, not Harrington, a different one, smiled politely. "Those are fascinating artifacts, certainly, but we are discussing formal algorithm systems, documented proofs, not archaeological curiosities." Amma said nothing, but she wrote in her notes, "Prove them wrong." In her second year, during a lecture on fractal geometry, The professor showed images of the Mandelbrot set. Fractal patterns, he explained, were first rigorously defined by Bernard Mandelbrot in 1975. Self-similar structures that repeat at different scales. Amma thought of her grandmother's cloth, the diamonds within diamonds, the triangles containing smaller triangles, the patterns that echoed themselves infinitely. She raised her hand again. What about traditional African architecture? The recursive structures in Ethiopian churches, the fractal patterns in Congolese textiles. The professor paused. Interesting observation, but those are artistic expressions, not mathematical formulations. After class, Amma went back to her small room. She unfolded Nana Afua's cloth, spread it across her desk, and for the first time, really looked, not as art, as mathematics. The Adwenisa pattern was complex. At first glance, it looked like repeating diamonds and triangles in yellow, green, red, and black. But the more Amma looked, the more she saw. The diamonds weren't just decorative. They were nested. A large diamond contained 4 smaller diamonds. Each smaller diamond contained 4 even smaller ones. It was fractal, self-similar at every scale. Exactly like the separate triangle that European mathematics had formalized in 1915. Except this cloth was older. Much older. Amma pulled out her laptop. She photographed the pattern, uploaded it to a fractal analysis program. The software calculated the fractal dimension. D is equal 1.585, the exact same dimension as the Serpinic triangle. But there was more. The weaving sequence itself. Amma had watched her grandmother weave hundreds of times. The shuttle moving over and under the warp threads. Over, under, over, under, over, under, under. It seemed random. But what if it wasn't? She started mapping it. Every over equals 1. Every under equals 0. The sequence for one row of the Adwenisa pattern. 1, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 0, 1, 1. She stared at it. That's not random. That's binary. The same binary logic that powers every computer, every algorithm, every line of code. The same binary that Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz formalized in 1679 and claimed as the foundation of computational thought. Amma's hands were shaking now, not from fear, from realization. Her grandmother wasn't just weaving cloth. She was executing an algorithm, a computational sequence developed centuries before the word computer existed. That night, Amma called her grandmother. It was 2 a.m. in Cambridge, 2 a.m. in Kumasi. But Nana Afua answered on the second ring, as if she'd been waiting. Nana, Amma said, "The cloth you gave me, the Adwenisa, how did you learn the pattern?" "From my mother," Nana Afua said simply. And she learned from her mother and hers before that. The pattern has been passed down for longer than anyone remembers. Nana, when you weave, how do you know which thread goes over and which goes under? Silence. Then, I count. You count what? The rhythm. The weaving has a rhythm, like drumming. Over and under. Over, over, under, over. Over, under, under, over. The reading tells me the pattern. Ama's heart was racing. Did anyone teach you why? Why that specific rhythm? No, Nana Afua said. We just knew that if you break the rhythm, the pattern breaks. The cloth won't be Adwinisa anymore. It will be something else. Something wrong. Ama closed her eyes. Her grandmother was describing algorithm logic. Input sequences, expected outputs, error correction. She just didn't use those words. Nana, Ama said carefully. What if I told you that the way you weave, the rhythm you follow, is the same way computers think? Nana Afua laughed. No mockery, just knowing. Ama, my child. Computers are new. Weaving is old. Very old. Maybe computers learned from us. For the next 18 months, Ama lived in two worlds. By day, she attended lectures, wrote papers, fulfilled her PhD requirements. By night, she researched. She traveled to Ghana during summer break, interviewed master weavers in Bonwire, the traditional center of Kente production. She learned that there were 43 distinct Kente patterns, each with a name, a meaning, a specific weaving sequence. She mapped every sequence to binary code. Every single one followed algorithm logic. Some patterns encoded symmetric groups, mathematical structures that describe transformation and repetition. Some patterns encoded recursive functions, where the output of one step becomes the input of the next. Some patterns encoded what modern computer scientists call cellular automata, simple rules that generate complex behaviors. She discovered that the most complex pattern, Adwenisa, actually contained 3 layers of mathematical sophistication. Layer 1, fractal geometry in the visual design. Layer 2, binary logic in the weaving sequence. Layer 3, error correcting code in the color transitions. If a weaver made a mistake, put a yellow thread where green should go, the pattern itself will signal the error, not through explicit instruction, through rhythm. Through feel, the weaver would know instinctively that something was wrong because the algorithm was broken. This was impossible. Except it wasn't. It was real, documented, provable. Ama returned to Kumasi one more time before her thesis defense. She sat with Nana Afua on the veranda, watching the sunset over the compound. Nana, she said, I need to understand. When you weave, do you think about numbers? Nana Afua smiled. No. I think about the story. The story? Every pattern tells a story. Adwenisa, seal of knowledge, tells the story of wisdom passed from elder to child. The big diamond is the elder. The 4 smaller diamonds are the children who learn. The even smaller diamonds are the grandchildren who carry it forward. The pattern repeats because knowledge must always repeat. It cannot die. Ama nodded slowly. So the mathematics, the fractal structure, it's not intentional? Nana Afua made that sound again. Thoughtful. Ama, you think mathematics is numbers, equations, proofs written on paper. But mathematics is deeper than that. Mathematics is pattern. Mathematics is rhythm. Mathematics is knowing that if you do this, then that will follow. We didn't write it in books. We wove it in cloth. We didn't call it fractal geometry. We called it wisdom repeating. We didn't call it binary logic. We called it the rhythm of the loom. But it's the same. She reached over and took Ama's hand. Your professors think we didn't know what we were doing. But we knew. We knew so well that we didn't need to explain it. We just did it. And we taught our children. And they taught theirs. For 1,000 years. Ama felt tears on her cheeks. Not from sadness. From understanding. Her grandmother was right. Mathematics didn't belong to Europe. It didn't start with Greeks or Arabs or Renaissance thinkers. It started wherever humans found patterns, recognized rhythms, built systems. And African weavers had been doing that for longer than anyone had bothered to acknowledge. Which brings us back to September 2019, to the seminar room at Cambridge, to Professor Harrington's dismissive smile, to Ama standing with her grandmother's cloth and 4 years of research. After her opening statement, after the stunned silence, Ama began her presentation. Fractal geometry, she said, is defined as a pattern that exhibits self-similarity at different scales. The Sierpinski triangle, formalized in 1915, is one of the most famous examples. She clicked to a slide showing the Sierpinski triangle, then clicked again. The Adwenesia pattern appeared beside it. Identical structure. This cloth, Ama said, was woven in 1847, 168 years before Waclaw Sierpinski published his proof, Murmurs in the Room. But the pattern itself is far older. According to oral histories and textile archaeology, Adwenisi had been woven for at least 400 years, possibly longer. She clicked to the next slide. Binary sequences. Binary logic, the foundation of all modern computing, was formalized by Leibniz in 1679. He claimed to have invented it. But here is the weaving sequence for one row of Adwenisi, mapped to binary notation. The sequences appeared. Notice the pattern. Notice the rhythm. This isn't random. This is computational. She clicked again. And here is the same sequence written in Python, a modern programming language. The code appeared beside the binary. They matched. Over the past 4 years, I have analyzed 43 traditional Kente patterns. 37 of them contain fractal structures. All 43 encode binary sequences. 18 of them contain error-correcting algorithms that modern computer scientists didn't develop until the 1950s. She looked directly at Professor Harrington. Professor, you said this is not mathematics, but I have documented, analyzed, and proven that Asante weavers developed fractal geometry centuries before Mandelbrot, binary logic centuries before Leibniz, algorithmic computation centuries before Turing, error-correcting code centuries before Hamming. The question is not whether this is mathematics. The question is, why has academic community refused to recognize it? The room was silent. Professor Harrington opened his mouth, closed it. Dr. Sarah Chen, a visiting professor from MIT, spoke first. Dr. Asante, this is extraordinary. But how do we know the weavers understood the mathematics? Couldn't these patterns be accidental? Aesthetic choices that happen to align with mathematical structures? Amma nodded. She'd anticipated this question. That's a fair question, and I asked it myself. So I conducted an experiment. She clicked to a new slide. I gave 12 master weavers, including my grandmother, a set of mathematical constraints. I asked them to weave a pattern that follows a specific recursive rule. I didn't use mathematical language. I described it as a pattern where each section contains 4 smaller versions of itself. All 12 weavers produced variations of Leibniz pattern without hesitation, because to them, that's not a mathematical constraint. That's just how you weave wisdom, repeating. She clicked again. I then asked them to weave a pattern that violates the recursive rule. A pattern where the sections don't contain smaller versions. All 12 weavers said the same thing. That's not a real pattern. That's broken. Amma looked around the room. They understand the mathematics. They just don't call it that. They call it the rhythm, balance, truth. But understanding doesn't require terminology. It requires mastery. All these weavers are masters. Dr. Elizabeth Okonkwo, a Nigerian mathematician and the only other black woman in the room, leaned forward. Dr. Asante, she said quietly, what you are proposing, this challenges the entire narrative of mathematical history. Yes, Amma said simply. It does. It suggests that African intellectual contributions have been systematically erased from the record. Not suggests, Dr. Okonkwo, proves. Dr. Okonkwo smiled. Not the polite academic smile, a real smile. Then I moved that this committee accept Dr. Asante's thesis with distinction. And I further moved that Cambridge establish a research initiative to document indigenous mathematical systems across Africa and the African diaspora. Because if this is what we've missed in Ghana, what else haven't we seen? Silence. Then slowly, other committee members nodded. Dr. Chen, I second the motion. Dr. Yusuf Al-Hamdi agreed. One by one, the votes came in, all in favor. Even Professor Harrington. He didn't smile, he didn't apologize, but he said quietly, Dr. Asante, you've given us much to reconsider. Three years later, Dr. Asante is an associate professor at the University of Ghana. She teaches a course called Indigenous Mathematical Systems. It's the most popular mathematics course in the university's history. Her thesis was published in the Journal of Mathematical History. It's been cited over 3,000 times. Museums across the world have begun relabeling African textiles, not as decorative arts, as computational mathematics. And Nana Afua, she still weaves, she still teaches. And now when people ask her what she's doing, she smiles and says, I'm computing. This is the story of how a grandmother's cloth became a mathematical revolution. But it's bigger than that. It's the story of how we define knowledge, how we determine what counts as intelligence, how we decide whose contribution to human understanding deserves recognition. For centuries, the story of mathematics had been told as if it belongs to Europe, As if the Greeks invented geometry, as if the Arabs invented algebra, as if Africans contributed nothing. But that story is a lie. African weavers were computing before computers. African architects were building fractals long before the term existed. African astronomers were mapping stars before telescopes. African mathematicians were solving equations before anyone wrote them down. The genius was always there. We just weren't looking. Or worse, we were looking and choosing not to see. Asante didn't discover African mathematics. She simply proved what her grandmother already knew. That the patterns woven into cloth, carved into wood, built into homes, sung into songs, those aren't just culture. They are not just art. They are intellectual sovereignty. They are proof that brilliance doesn't need a university. That genius doesn't require a degree. That mathematics, like humanity itself, began in Africa. And it was woven into every thread. The ancestors didn't leave us patterns. They left us proofs. We just had to learn to read them. Dr. Asante.
When the drum speaks, Africa remembers. When stories